Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of What a Disaster, where we watch and review a disaster movie as close to weekly as any of us can possibly stand. I'm Gregory Allen, and this week we have a little bit different cast. Last week, Dick Sawasinski and Elizabeth Bador were both let go, so we're joined this week by Richard Sawasinski and Liz Bador. And we also have a special guest from the podcast Every Horror Movie on Netflix, which if you haven't listened to it, you absolutely should. And it is Chris Slatt. This week we will be watching James Cameron's 1997 smash hit Titanic, which was chosen by Chris, who among other things appears to have a lot of spare time on his hands, which explains why he picked such a long fucking movie. Hi, Chris. Thanks for being here with us today. Why don't you explain to us what makes Titanic a disaster movie and why you chose it for our podcast today?
Well, what makes it a disaster movie is self-explanatory. It's at the time, it was probably the greatest transportation disaster that had ever happened in 1912. Should I go on?
That's it? That's all you got?
No, that's fine. That's fine. And it's just, on top of that, it's just a great movie. I'm very passionate about it. I'm passionate about James Cameron, the director. I will defend both James Cameron and Titanic to the death, and I look forward to doing that today.
All right. So, yeah, as Chris mentioned, this one is directed and written by James Cameron, had a budget of $200 million, and made back, doesn't look like it made that back. It just says $2.1 billion. Is that more?
$2.7 billion.
$2.7 billion.
No, it made $2.1 billion, so it made it back. The budget was $200 million, and it made $2.1 billion.
Oh, billion with a B. Okay.
Yeah.
That explains a lot.
This wasn't a movie based on Star Wars. It wasn't a movie based on superheroes. This was a standalone movie that became the highest grossing movie of all time for like 15 years, only to be overthrown by James Cameron's Avatar.
So, out of the blue, some guy makes a movie about a boat that sinks, and everybody loves it.
And then Into the Blue People, he makes another movie called Avatar that made $2.7 billion.
Into the blue?
Into the Blue.
Out of the blue and then into the blue?
Yeah.
Into the blue people. Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. All right, so in this movie, we've got Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. He plays Jack Dawson, who is kind of the hero-ish guy. Kate Winslet, I would call her the primary protagonist, frankly. She plays Rose DeWitt, who is kind of a stingy old lady. Billy Zane plays Cal Hockley. That is Kate Winslet's fiance.
Not at the time when she's an old lady, though.
No,
There's
he's
two Kates.
Yeah, two Kate Winslets. Well, no, two Roses.
Well, yes.
Yeah, the second Rose is Gloria Stewart, who plays a 100-year-old Rose.
And how old was she at the time? Because she was old. And
The actor?
the actress, I think she became like the oldest Academy Award nominee of all time.
She was born in 1910.
Yeah, so she would have been 87.
Yeah.
Yeah, born in 1910. Wow, she was old.
Young lady.
Yeah. She died in 2010, actually, at age 100. So when the movie was made, she would have been, what, 86?
So when she died in the movie, she was the same age as when she died in real life?
Spoilers.
Oh, yeah. Everybody dies in this movie.
Everyone worth caring about.
Well, before we get too deep in the movie, I'm curious about the experience that you've all had with this movie. We talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but this is a new movie for at least one of you, and another one of you loved this movie when it came out. And so when did you all first see this movie, and how did you feel about it?
Well, Chris, I hated this fucking movie, and I've never seen it before until last week. Or actually until yesterday. Sorry, we were supposed to watch it last week. We watched it last night. I've avoided this movie for, how long has it been out now?
20 years.
20 years, right?
Yeah, they released a 20th anniversary special edition in 3D.
And it made them $36 million more. But that's besides the point. I avoided this movie for that long. I avoided the 3D version. I finally watched it for this podcast. And I think it's just a different experience if you pick this movie up 20 years after it was made. It's paced kind of slow. The romance I felt was really strained. There were times in the movie I was just like, could something fucking happen? Do I have to watch him draw this entire picture? Or can I just watch him draw like part of this picture and just imply he drew the rest of it? So yeah, I kind of hate this movie. It did look really good.
So you wanted to watch him draw the boobs and then stop right there. That was all you needed.
All I needed was like the outline of her head, and I would have known what he was doing for the rest of the scene.
So Liz was a big fan of Titanic, like the boat, not the movie, but apparently probably loved the movie, right? when it came out, or roughly when you were allowed to watch it because you're like 6?
Well, I was 8 years old when it came out, and I was not allowed to see it, even though I had checked out every single book the library had to offer on the subject, which seemed unfair. But I think around age 12, my parents finally made a little cut-up version of the movie themselves without the sexy stuff in it so that I could watch the boat parts. And I liked the movie a lot. It was definitely a little... Visually, I thought it was cool as I've grown up. And it was really cool to see how they brought it to life. But other than that, the story was a lot more tedious than I remembered.
It is a pretty intense movie for 8-year-olds. It's only a PG-13 movie, but they cram a lot of stuff into it. And it's not, like graphic as much as it's just horrific. Once the boat starts sinking, it really becomes a nightmarish movie on all kinds of levels. Even more nightmarish because it's all true. So
how did he pull the PG-13 rating with the boobs? I mean, that's straight on nudity. You don't get a PG-13
and an F word.
Nudity. It's just some boobs and an F word.
Yeah.
That can happen in PG-13.
It used to happen all the time. I feel
it just doesn't need to be like it. Context is important for that. I think where if you are showing boobs in a sex scene, no dice. But if you're just showing bare breasts, it's totally legit for PG-13.
Yeah, we're a little nudity in film is a little different now too. You don't see casual nudity in film as often as you used to. It's a different world. I feel like.
You go back to the 70s and you get PG James Bond movies with, nipples in the opening credits. Greg, did you see this movie before?
I had seen this movie as a teenager, and I was too cool for it when it first came out. When it came out in theaters, everybody was like, it's so good. And I was like, there's no way it's that good. I'm not going to even waste my time. Plus, I was kind of a loser, and I didn't have very many friends, so that made me hate it more. But yeah, when I went back and watched it for this, I kind of loved it. Like, there was a lot more going on than I gave credit for as a teenager. I appreciate a lot more of the movie than I would have then. All in all, I'd say it was a net benefit to have watched it again. It was definitely worth seeing again.
I was kind of in the same boat where I did not see this movie when it... Funny.
That boat sank.
I had not seen it when it came out originally. Everyone in my school had seen it, and, the people loved it, and then there was like a blowback to it because so many people liked it. Then that's when it became cool to hate Leonardo DiCaprio and all that stuff. But I never saw Titanic through all that, and I wasn't really aware of anything about it past the memes and stuff until it got re-released in 2012, I think, for the 100th anniversary of the Titanic. And so it was back in theaters. That's when it was in 3D. And by then I was a James Cameron fan, so I said, well, I owe it to myself to see Titanic. I'm going to see it on the big screen, and I thought it was great. Sure, it's got some issues. I'm not saying everyone has to like Titanic, but I think everyone has to respect Titanic.
Yeah, so in the opening, we've got, I don't know how I feel about the way they're bringing all these characters together on the hunt for something. I mean, they eventually tell you pretty much right away that they're after the heart of the ocean, and it's just an excuse to put submarines in Titanic, really.
Honestly, it was James Cameron's excuse for this. The whole reason he wanted to make this movie was because he wanted to look at the Titanic with some submarines. So he gets the studio to finance that, gets a bunch of submarines. That's the actual science vessel he used to go look at the Titanic that's in the film. And he just goes, great, now we'll just shoehorn this at the beginning and at the end. If it throws some Bill Paxton at it, done. It adds like a half hour to this movie that doesn't need to be there, honestly. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the shots of the Titanic. It's some of my favorite parts in the movie, but it's completely unnecessary to the plot.
Yeah, I mean, as far as movies in the 90s go, I would say that the use of CG for Titanic and kind of stitching all that stuff together was probably pretty well done start to finish.
I mean, the practical effects were incredible in this movie. Some of the best practical effects ever made.
I mean, James Cameron's always on the cutting edge of the effects, and he's always he's like kind of a, I don't know, it's probably too much to call him a scientist, but he's someone who is very curious about technology and the world, and his curiosity kind of informs his movies more than the other way around.
He's like a civilian scientist, right? Because he's super obsessed. Like, I read some things, you can really deep dive into this movie,
so to speak.
So to speak, yeah. So you got to kind of be cautious on how far you want to read, because it's just a rabbit hole. But I was reading that there's some scenes in this movie where he made the actors walk the scenes backwards because he wanted to make sure the boat left port going the way it left.
Oh yeah, stickler for detail.
Yeah. And so he took all the scripts and reversed the way people walk. So he goes, now you got to walk left instead of right. And they flip it in post.
Yeah, because they only built half the set.
Yeah.
Only half of the ship. Because this movie was a budget nightmare. And
Yeah, the studio thought they weren't going to make any money. Actually, James Cameron he didn't take profits from this film at first. There's a couple of rounds of profits he didn't take because the studio was like, this isn't going to make any money. You're at $200 million in 1997. That's a huge fucking budget. And he was kept going over.
I actually liked the way they introduced the characters. I liked being shown the emotions that everybody was kind of invoked, or that they had invoked when they were seeing the Titanic for the first time, and how they happened to be on the ship. Like, all of it was cool to me. The Billy Zane's character coming up, basically showing up late and throwing money at it to fix the problem to get his stuff on the ship. And Rose basically having none of it was terrific.
All of the immigrants during this scene, or all of the third-class passengers, which included the immigrants, were painstakingly getting their teeth and hair and everything checked. And you see, like, Rose and her family walk on with their dogs, just totally unhindered.
Mm-hmm. But no, everything is, I mean, the car that they have sex in, there was actually a car on the ship. Like, there are very few details about the boat and its passengers or cargo that are embellished.
Because people are crazy about that stuff. If he would have embellished too far, he would have just got nailed on all the details and nobody would have been able to watch the movie.
Right.
Even the artifacts, like when you're watching the first scene and the submarines are kind of floating around the wreckage, and you see a shoe and a doll head and a pair of eyeglasses. Those are all real things that they found down there, which I thought was kind of cool.
And like they find the portrait of Rose that kind of incites all the action, and it's in a leather portfolio, and it's preserving. Like, oh, that's ridiculous. That would never be there. But they've actually recovered documents from the Titanic that were in leather because it doesn't decay, and that's why the only thing that's left of the people on the ship are their shoes. So you go on the ship and you see little pairs of shoes here and there that used to be whole people.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So people, when they drown, turn into shoes?
Yeah, after being exposed to all the bacteria that eats everything else.
Okay, so the sea pressure and the bacteria turns you into shoes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. No, I didn't know that.
Even if you're not wearing shoes, you just become shoes.
You just become shoes.
That's how shoes were invented, actually.
They just drown their friends and family and put them on later.
Yeah.
Something that annoyed me about this scene, though, was that the robots were kind of like digging around and they were pulling up doors and they were like just messing stuff up. And it's very well known that Robert Ballard, who was the first person that went down to visit the Titanic, put up a plaque that basically amounts to, "This is an active gravesite, don't rob it." So it was kind of like a really weird way to get the story going, I guess.
They were very careless with the artifacts they brought up in the movie. They were just like, look at this stuff.
They're like ripping it out of the safe, throwing
Just cut open the
stuff.
safe and then just ripping it out like it's slop.
Yeah,
which
this
it
isn't a
basically
necklace. This
was.
isn't a necklace. This isn't a necklace.
And I don't know the history of the Titanic excavation to know if that's based on any issues that were actually happening. I mean, I'm sure that there's been unscrupulous people going down there. I don't know if they've damaged the ship or anything like that. But like these guys aren't portrayed as preservationists of any sort. They're portrayed as
treasure hunters.
Treasure hunters.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's been a lot of that around the Titanic site, and lots of legal disputes and stuff. So.
Probably a lot of treasure down there.
Whatever company has the license to the site, which is like kind of an ethical quagmire, sells like pieces of coal from the coal that the ship had on board for the engines.
Oh, wow.
So you can buy like a piece of coal from the Titanic for.
Couldn't I just get like any piece of coal though, and just say it's from the
But,
Titanic?
then you wouldn't be able to hear the ghosts screaming when you touch it.
Oh, fair enough. So they turn into shoes, and their ghosts turn into coal.
Yeah, but I would love
like
to have like a piano key or something.
That would be cool.
No, I would. I mean,
Piano
it would
key
be. It would
sweet.
be amazing to have any. Really, you're right. Any artifact from something that got sunk and is part of that major of a well-known disaster.
So they got really excited about that safe they pulled up.
Yeah,
Like
he
they were
was stoked.
celebrating. I knew it was bad news. You don't celebrate that hard about something you haven't opened.
Well, plus it's
Not at the beginning of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd celebrate just to see the fireplace that they saw in that room. Damn.
Yeah, but those guys didn't care about that. They want treasure. That was a
They're
treasure
there for
hunting
the
group.
heart of the ocean.
The fireplace, something interesting. I think the fireplace is connected with this. I just watched this thing on National Geographic with James Cameron kind of revisiting what we know now about the Titanic. And at the time they made the movie, they built sets and things based on what they knew about the Titanic and then what they kind of extrapolated from how other ships like the Titanic were built and stuff like that. So often you'll see a set and maybe they knew what half the room looked like, but not the other half. But then in the 20 years since this movie came out, they've gone back down and explored more of it. And so some of their theories about the design of the fireplace, for example, have been confirmed, and like the clock on the fireplace is actually
and the grand
accurate.
staircase, yes.
And then other things they found where they were completely wrong about, but.
So they're accurate on some stuff that they weren't sure about, though, right?
But just amazing
Which is
that
pretty
they put that much effort into it, and that when you see the clock on the fireplace, that's actually kind of what it looks like, but they didn't know that at the time they made the movie.
You know what sucks, though, when you put that kind of effort into something to be detail-oriented, the little things you get wrong would drive you bananas.
If you listen to the director's commentary with James Cameron, he says things like, we now know that bulkhead door opens the other way. I wish I would fix that. But.
So the only reason, that's kind of interesting because I feel like there were a lot more references. There was a lot of reference material available because the Titanic was a sister ship to the Olympic, and the Olympic was built first, and the Titanic literally followed the Olympic's plans to build. So I feel like all that stuff should have been available. I don't know what James Cameron was doing.
Probably just the ornate details.
James Cameron, if you're listening to this podcast, give me a call. Tell me what's going on.
He would just run circles around you.
I want to know. I want to know why he wasn't using reference material that was available.
Hashtag Titanic Truth. Mm-hmm. You go to our website, you can see about how the boat wasn't going fast enough to rip it open when it hit that bulkhead. It must have been TNT hidden in the basement. That's my theory.
Yeah,
how was there ice floating in salt water?
I think it's a little too soon and disrespectful for us to make these sorts of assumptions, and the people that passed away would not appreciate this. It's too soon.
I like the Tumblr post that says that the Titanic probably sank because too many people time traveled to the Titanic to stop it from sinking.
So Bill Paxton has to get a 100-year-old lady to come hang out with him, right?
Yeah, because she sees on TV that she sees the drawing. Basically, Grandma's nude photos were leaked, and she saw them on TV and was like, "I need to get this stuff taken care of.
I got to show these scientists the real thing."
She definitely flashed him to get on that ship. I'm sure of it.
They're all looking at that picture of her, and she's just like, "I look great, didn't I?
I was a dish."
I was a dish. It's just like, whoa.
It's all a little contrived, because then they fly her out to the middle of the Atlantic on a helicopter.
There it is.
She brings all her suitcases and all her family photos,
which are still from 1912. Those suitcases were ancient.
Right. And so it's all an excuse to get her on the ship so she can kind of provide the contemporary narration of her experience. So, I mean, if there's something I'm not crazy about with the movie, it's how some of that was handled.
We get the character introductions, which I brought up a little bit earlier. We see the rich people get on, the rich folk taking advantage of having money and being jerks.
Priority booking passes.
Next, we get to meet Leonardo DiCaprio character, Jack Dawson. He is gambling. They're playing poker, it looks like, I think, and just there's money and Titanic tickets on the table. I don't know how those Titanic tickets that would have cost basically $500 to $800 at that point were somehow on the table with pocket change, but that's how it went down. They're playing the game and come out on top, win the tickets, and they have 5 minutes.
Sparing their opponents' lives.
Jack and his little Italian immigrant buddy,
Fabrizio.
Yep. And they just have a grand time.
Yeah. Fabrizio has the best time. Yeah. Out of everybody in this movie, Fabrizio has the best time.
Is there no more pure character?
He kind of drops out of the movie. Do we see him die?
Yes.
I think he gets shot, right?
No?
Almost.
The funnel falls on him while he's swimming away.
Oh, right.
He saves everybody. But he would have frozen to death anyways.
He was a hero, but he would have frozen to death.
Yeah. Yeah. Spoilers. Lots of people freeze to death.
So we meet all these characters, and now, of course, we have to throw them in the mix, right? So they're all on the ship and having a grand old time, except Rose fucking hates everything about her life, especially her fiancé, and has no idea how to break up. I mean, I would if I were willing to stay in a relationship that long with somebody that I hated
Well, Rose has her mother on board who is very much into this you're going to marry up and make some money kind of lifestyle. So she's got a lot of pressure. And she's young. She's, 19 in this movie? If
17.
That? 17.
Yep.
So she's under a lot of pressure to just do what she's expected to and marry this rich guy, even though her heart's not in it.
Yeah, but we also find out halfway through the movie or whatever that their family's broke. They lost everything. The dad died. Rose's father died and left him with nothing. And Rose's mom says to her, "Do you want me working at a seamstress? Because that's what's going to happen if you don't marry Cal."
And Cal is just his only solution to any relationship problem is just throw money at it.
Or throw tables.
Every problem.
Tables, money. I mean, he's very controlling, which fits the character throughout the movie. And he's jealous, aware that Rose doesn't give a shit about him, and is a total dick.
And he has the worst eyebrows I've ever seen. I hate them.
Why does he always look... Billy Zane in everything, though, always looks like he's wearing eyeliner. Are his eyes just... Does he have...
He does look like that. Like
He put it on for the Phantom, and it wouldn't come off.
It wouldn't come off. That makes sense. The Phantom was so good.
Yeah.
Why aren't we watching that?
No disaster.
Oh, well.
Anyway, we're going to take a quick break and come right back with more Titanic and probably digression.
I can see the Statue of Liberty already. Very small, of course. I'm the king of the world!
Welcome back to What a Disaster. We're still talking about Titanic. Want to know how it ends? Stick around. We're going to be getting there shortly. But,
I was really excited to see what happened in the end of this. The Titanic is such a mystery.
But yeah, so basically, the conflict pre-iceberg begins when Rose decides that she doesn't want to marry Billy Zane, so she's just going to straight up kill herself. A reasonable solution.
Yeah, rather than breaking up with him, it seems like jumping off the back of a boat is the better choice.
So she's just going to go jump off the back of the boat, and our man Jack, Leo, he's just sitting on a little bench having a cig under the stars, artist that he is, and he's like, hey, and he smooth talks her out of killing herself, and they fall in love in that very moment.
Actually, she fell first.
Oh, she does fall.
She slips trying to get back on, and he catches her.
He saves her life.
Saves her mother flippin' life. Drags her carefully back onto the ship, and for his trouble, because the guards don't see him save her life, they just see him on top of her, and her dress is up a little bit. They saw ankle and were like, "This guy's trouble."
Rape.
Furthermore, nothing really appeared to set her off in this scene. There wasn't really anything. There was no fight. There was no problem. She was just all of a sudden running across the ship after dinner, freaking out, pushing people out of the way to kill herself.
Yeah,
I think we lost something in there.
You kind of get the sense that the dinner is just kind of...
Yeah, that she's. You can tell that she is miserable, for sure.
She's 17. I mean, it didn't have to be a whole lot. She just saw her future and was
Right.
like, nope.
I mean, hormones and wow, this guy sucks.
Her mom took away her Linkin Park CD. She's like, I'm going to kill myself.
And said, "You're gonna marry this guy, or I'm gonna take away your car." I will still say, though, this movie, for the most part, looks great. I have had no problems with the style, no problems with the movie. I'm a fan at this point.
Very important foreshadowing, though, in the scene where she almost jumps off the back of the boat, because he says, hey, you're not going to like that because it's cold. I grow up in Wisconsin. Sometimes we fall through the ice fishing. It's like 1,000 knives entering your body at once. And then you see so many people fall and they freeze to death in the water. And so
It's like it's excruciating pain.
Yeah,
he explains how he's going to die
communicates the pain.
slowly later and
Right.
how much it's going to suck for him.
Right.
Between the cinematography and the practical effects and blending the generated and the real, I mean, he tells a good story in this.
I mean, think about the Titanic movie that so many other directors would make. It would either be just about the Titanic. There wouldn't be a love story. It wouldn't combine the modern day with the past as gracefully as this does.
Could we next week, maybe we just write down what we think J.J. Abrams would look like, a J.J. Abrams Titanic would look like, and review that?
It needs
'Cause
more
I'm
lens
into
flare
it.
and a shinier boat.
The boat would be super shiny. Everybody would be kind of like overly aggressive most of the time, even with their friends.
She's pretty aggressive all the time.
Instead of the captain
17.
quietly going to the wheelhouse to silently accept his fate, you'd have him like struggling with the wheel and 4 guys screaming at him to the last second.
There would be so many icebergs zipping by on either side of the ship as they go through it, as they navigate the iceberg field.
And
in
all
the
their
North
clothes would be a
Atlantic
lot
or
tighter.
Pacific. Rose gets saved by Jack, and now Jack suddenly has to be thrown into the snake pit as Kathy Bates?
Yeah, my
Kathy
favorite
Bates.
character, Kathy Bates.
Yeah.
She's
Why
the
is
best-
she your favorite character?
I just like her in this movie.
Why isn't that guard that's going right now running your favorite character?
Because Kathy Bates has, she lives in both worlds, and
She doesn't live in both worlds. She's rich. She lives in the rich
But
world.
she's
that
new money.
guard.
Poor little Richard.
She's
That
new
guard.
money, and she doesn't follow etiquette. She constantly breaks etiquette, and she helps Jack out. Anybody who's willing to help out somebody poor because they see the injustice in that,
No.
immediately wins.
Nope. She sucks.
She
These
dresses
guards
up
are
in a
where
tux.
it's at. They're like, I don't know anything about this situation. You're a rapist.
You mean the guards who were not looking out for icebergs and caused 1,000 people to die?
So that's the thing. I was reading about this actually about the iceberg, and apparently a letter was sent to the Titanic that they don't think made it to the captain's room, saying, "Hey, icebergs, bro," and it just was never given to the
got caught
captain.
in the spam filter.
Yeah.
They have to check their spam folder.
The theory goes that if it had gotten to the captain's room, he would have just stopped the ship and waited till morning to actually go through, and so he could maybe see what's going on in the water in front of him.
I mean, it was a perfect storm of coincidences.
And mistakes, but yes.
yeah.
And so Jack goes to dinner with everybody.
Yep.
The rich people.
Great
dinner.
scene.
Yeah.
Great scene. He's just giving them hell.
Now, Jack is poor,
Yes.
but he's given clothes by Richard's favorite character, so he doesn't
Liz's
look
too.
completely out of place.
And he's given the gift of bullshit from God.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I said, he's a con man. He's taking advantage of everyone he can to live high on the hog.
He's
He's
poor.
a hooker drawing, beer drinking wild man.
You know what? And that's a good point, because so he really does, make Rose fall in love with him, but is there really any reason to suggest that he's in love with Rose?
I mean, he lives. I mean, he dies for her. But like,
Yeah, he could have died. He could have thrown her in the water and taken the door.
I just feel like he just likes the story. Like, he's the kind of person who just wants the story. He never really thinks about the ending. Just wants to be known as the guy who does those things.
He wants to tell a story to the next 17-year-old that he tries to manipulate into having sex with him in a car on a boat.
He's probably actually 34 in this.
How old is Jack Dawson?
He was a coal shoveler in the basement of the Titanic, so it's hard.
So they
Yeah.
found a guy. They didn't know about that guy when they filmed this.
Oh, really?
But yeah, they found out after they shot Titanic that there was a guy named Jack Dawson, which isn't incredibly
Well,
surprising.
I think it was James Dawson or something, but the grave
Jay Dawson, yeah.
It said Jay Dawson on his grave.
He was he shoveled coal on the Titanic.
People still leave flowers and their bras on that tombstone.
I left my bra.
I just leave naked drawings of myself on it.
So after dinner and all this stuff, I wrote.
Well, hang, before you go to after dinner, let's talk about the dinner itself, because he gets in there and they are expecting to just roll this kid by being total dicks to him.
Yeah.
And he's got an answer. He's got a sharp tongue. And he for sure is, I keep saying con man, but that's more or less what he does throughout this movie is just talk his way. He bullshits his way through every scene that he's in with where there's kind of an imbalance of power.
He went over to the table by saying, your guys' life is a harness. You guys are tied down with your money. I'm free. I just do whatever the fuck I want. Who's
Here,
having a
here.
better life? And when everybody goes to have cigars and liquor and talk about politics, he's like, I'm going to go fuck this girl. So, I mean,
Your girl, by the way.
that you left.
Yeah.
He's like, oh,
wanna
we're
go
just
to-
talking about politics and society. It's nothing that would interest you.
And to be fair, it wouldn't be interesting for
No,
him.
he's right.
Yeah.
And he gives them a taste of how it would be to live as Jack at the table and then fucks off to go be Jack.
Now, Jack does have. This is why I think Jack dies for this lady. This is the ultimate challenge. Rose has a well-funded and excellently coordinated team of cockblockers.
Oh, it's like Mossad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's intense, and he finds a way around it. I mean, he gets around every person in this movie. Every person is working against him and Rose getting together, and he just makes it happen.
Oh, God. You want to hear something real sad? You know what else was on the shipping manifest for the Titanic?
Babies.
Worse.
Puppies.
Puppies.
Of course, puppies.
Yeah.
Nobody can just deal with the domestic puppies. They got to ship them over from England.
Right.
There are puppies in your local shelter. Please adopt and make sure you spay and neuter your
It's
pets.
probably just as well. They probably would have been euthanized upon landing because of carrying disease.
I don't know. They didn't really have that concern unless you were a poor immigrant, really.
The euthanize the poor immigrants.
I think so.
So how did Jack, being a poor American, get all the way to France?
Probably in some either steerage or third-class ticket and just hopped a ship using his wits and sharp tongue.
He cheated at poker, right? That's implied.
Did they imply that he cheated?
No.
During dinner, he said, I had a very lucky hand at poker, and he winks, and everybody's like, I make my own luck, and he goes, it was a very lucky hand. He implied that he cheated at poker.
Oh, I didn't really...
I never caught that, but
Yeah,
that
that's
makes
a good-
sense.
I just thought he was talking about the girl.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he
It's-
could have been too. Maybe it's a triple entendre.
Oh, triple entendre.
Every entendre.
The most complicated of the entendres. Man, I love Leonardo DiCaprio's body of work. He has done some excellent movies.
He has.
I'm a huge Leo fan, just because of his acting ability alone. He is Catch Me If You Can, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and Django Unchained. Like everything Leonardo DiCaprio does is great.
It's ridiculous to me that there was such a blowback to Titanic and people hated Leo and were afraid of him for as long as they were. He's a great actor. He has a great body of work. And you know what?
He
Beyond
has
that,
a great body of work.
beyond that, he has range. Like
He didn't want to do this because there's no range to this character, and he actually changed the character. Cameron wanted to be like this limping, kind of nerdy artist guy. And Leo was like, no, that doesn't work for me. And he was actually kind of a dick on set. His personality kind of bumped against Cameron a little bit, but it made the character more interesting. I mean, it's kind of a boring character. He doesn't change, doesn't get better. Nothing happens to Jack in this movie other than he dies and he falls in love with Rose.
Well, Jack's a catalyst. He's not really a character so much as he is just the reason things happen in the plot.
And Leo was worried about that. Then he decided that the challenge was being a boring character and making that boring character interesting. Like,
Yeah.
how do I be this very already well-defined character?
I mean, I wouldn't call him necessarily a boring character because he the chemistry that he provides in the scenes he's in is what makes him really move in this movie, and he did a great job.
And you root for him just because he's in shitty circumstances, and people are asking him, treating him like garbage because he's poor.
Yeah. Now, if any rich people are listening to this, like very, very rich, like
Fuck you.
silly fucking rich, I want to know if Jack is a character that you sympathized with when you watched Titanic, or if you were like rooting for Billy Zane's guy. I'm really curious. Did
too.
Jack resonate with you?
So I didn't notice this before, but in this scene, Fabrizio is there.
Which scene is that?
This one.
Which scene?
It is where
they can't see it.
It's the party in third
it's
class.
the real party in third class.
The real party.
And they're dancing, and Fabrizio makes an appearance, and he's got a little blonde lady that he's dancing with, and he asks her, "Is it okay if I put my hand here?" And that's just in such direct contrast to like Rose and Jack's whole relationship.
Oh man, Jack is a dick.
Yeah.
She's like, no. He's like, yes.
You're going to dance. Then you're going to have sex with me in the car.
He coerces a 17-year-old.
All right, you keep saying that, but really, how often does she really say no in this movie?
Anytime, like the spit and then the dancing, Jack, wait, that's a no.
It's she. Okay, all right.
She-
Point taken.
Yeah, he gets a little molesty.
She goes, I can't do this. And rather than going, yeah, you can. Are you worried that I'm going to touch you?
Are
you
you
worried you can't
sure?
dance? Like trying to figure out what she can't do.
Can I put my hand here?
He just grabs her and pulls her
What
in.
are your concerns? No. Get over here, lady. He's disgusting. Jack's a jerk.
What? So is her, or so is she.
So at the beginning of this movie, Jack gets on the boat with Fabrizio and does that really iconic scene, I'm king of the world. And everybody always remembers that as Rose being the person behind him. But it's actually
Right.
Fabrizio that's at his penis level.
Right.
Like between Jack's legs is actually his friend. And then later on, does the same thing with Rose and totally cheats on Fabrizio.
The bro down is eclipsed by the romance.
Yeah, I felt bad for Fabrizio. Like he goes on his boat to hang out with his buddy, totally ditches him, and then takes their moment away from him.
And then everybody dies.
Everybody dies.
So this party scene, by the way, like they cut quickly to the scene where they're just talking about politics and business, and they try and make it seem like that's not fun. But how many times have you spent all night drinking and just hanging out talking to your friends?
about politics and
shit.
business.
Yeah.
I mean, it just exactly. You get drunk and you yell about politics. That's half the fun.
How's that not fun? Yeah. It's not until about hour 22 into this movie, which is like about where we're at, talking about it, where they finally kiss. So you're already a full movie into this movie.
You say a full movie, but it's like
really
a day
goes.
into their relationship. I mean, they launch on the 10th and it sinks on the 14th. Well, 14th, 15th, but still. A lot of this movie, we just get like, she's unhappy in her relationship and he yells and then he throws stuff. And that happens a bunch of times, I feel like, where he's just mad.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm looking at some of these scenes. I realize that, you know, even though Cal is remarkably an asshole, he's not completely unsympathetic, I don't think.
No, absolutely not.
Wait, man. He's 30, so he's not married at 30. He likes Rose a lot.
He loves Rose.
And she just fucks around with him on this boat.
Yeah.
With this kid. You know?
And he, like, his priorities aren't in the right place. His priorities don't align with our priorities as the audience, but we understand that in his world, he's like, I'm giving you everything that you could possibly want. Why don't you love me? And he just doesn't understand.
Yeah, he just can't comprehend why what he's doing, which is what he's been taught to do, isn't working with this girl.
He's not a two-dimensional villain. Like his henchman is a two-dimensional villain.
Yeah,
But-
sure. And she doesn't communicate at all. She's a terrible communicator.
She's 17. Did you communicate well at 17?
Yeah,
when
they
you
were
were
very
in a
clear on that,
relationship?
but she was 17, and that's tough.
But scene to scene, this movie's so strong. Like, you know, you look at scenes like the breakfast scene where she's, you know, Cal's talking to her, and it's got layers. The way the scene unfolds is very interesting. Here you have a scene where she's talking to her mom, and they're having an argument about, you know, you're going to marry this guy, and she's tying her corset, like the symbolism, and then how she's tying it tighter than usual and stuff as she's talking to her. Just great touches.
On top of the symbolism there, we're learning about why she tolerates this behavior, and she is there. She feels, I mean, you're putting a burden on a 17-year-old of having to maintain your mother's lifestyle to which she's been accustomed, and then you get you're stuck. And how do you deal with that at 17? You're screwed.
I didn't start hating this movie though until right about hour 30 when it gets deep into the romance stuff.
Yeah, why do you hate this movie?
Because James Cameron insisted on this being a long movie because he wanted to have a fucking Oscar. It wasn't a long movie because it benefited the movie.
James Cameron doesn't give a fuck about Oscars. He gives a fuck about money and going deep in the ocean.
He wanted an epic. He wanted to make an epic film. He wanted this to be his epic. And there's just some scenes in this movie that, like,
If you can
are
name
just too fucking long.
If you can name a scene in this movie that does not provide context or move the plot forward, I would be impressed to hear
It's about to happen. They're about to run through this boat for way too long. They're about to hang out in that room.
You need to establish that this is lust, first of all. It's a 4-day relationship at an absolute maximum. And really, the first day she didn't know him. It was the first day that she was going to jump off the damn ship. So she meets him in the middle of the night, has this one encounter, sleeps it off, meets him the next night. And so a day and a half of love. And you've got to get all that out of the way. You have to establish that she is in love with Jack. Jack may not be in love with her, but...
I mean, I get all that, but he just insisted on these really long, boring scenes. The scene in the bedroom where he draws her is so fucking long, and nothing happens. They show him draw the entirety of the picture from beginning to end.
How much foreshadowing, though, is in this movie? Not to step on
Every
your
single element of wisdom Jack provides, whenever he says anything sage, you can just assume that it is foreshadowing.
Well, all right. I'm trying to think about that from a filmmaking perspective. Does the scene where he's drawing the portrait take longer than it needs to take? I don't know. I mean, I feel like if you cut that down, you could do it faster, but then it would just be Jack and Rose chasing each other around a boat. I think because it's such a short romance, you need to have that time where you let the relationship breathe a little bit and being vulnerable with each other. And if you spend 5 minutes on that scene when you know, it's better than just going around the bases, so to speak.
Right. I just honestly got bored. I was like, the love scenes, they felt boring. They felt paced very slowly. They felt like a lot of establishing. There was still a lot of establishing shots. Like here, we made this big set. We want to show every inch of this big set. We don't want to leave anything out. So there's tons of establishing shots.
I see it a different way. Yeah, the spectacle's important. the showing off their craftsmanship's important, but also this movie does a really good job of establishing the geography of the ship, which becomes super important once the ship starts to sink.
Can I also say I don't really like Kate Winslet's performance very much. I don't find it convincing. I don't feel like she's in love with Jack. I don't feel like these two people are in love when I watch this movie.
It's not love, it's lust. It's 2 days of knowing each other.
I mean, they're 17. I've never seen two 17-year-olds that
How old
I thought
is
were in
Jack?
love.
We don't have Jack's age though.
How old is Jack?
Jack's 30.
Jack is a time traveler.
I mean, he was young in real life.
He's 20 in the movie, it looks like.
Okay.
So he doesn't have a lot more experience than her, but
I thought some of the scenes later on with Billy Zane trying to set Jack up were just not necessary. The boat's going down, he's still trying to set Jack up.
True.
I thought that you could have built something else to create the same kind of conflict, you know?
That's true. And they actually did delete some scenes. Like there was a Killjoy or whatever his name was. What's his name?
Loveface.
Lovejoy.
Lovejoy.
Loveface is chasing them with a gun through
Yeah.
the dining room. They cut that out because they're like, you know what? The ship's sinking. That's drama enough, right? And that's what you're saying.
If he was not in this movie at all, it would have made it a better movie. Every scene he's in is dragged out and stupid and pointless. Like he goes on to talk to Jack for like 10 minutes in the basement. Useless. We don't need that. We don't need any more exposition on Jack. We know his life, and that guy has no story of his own to tell. He's just there. He's like, I got a gun. He waves it around.
I mean, the sinking of the ship is drawn out for an hour or so in this movie. It seems like
That's too long. I'm like, when the fuck is this ship going to sink?
But they're telling a story alongside the sinking of the ship, and that's you're arguing that they didn't need to tell that story while the ship was sinking.
It did take hours to sink in real life, though. It was painfully, excruciatingly
overnight.
drawn out.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. Like the ship hits the iceberg, and you're like, oh, that's it, right? No, because for a long time after the ship hit the iceberg, they didn't know that it was a problem.
Nobody knew they were going to die.
Yeah.
Rose and Jack thought they were going to be cool.
Right.
They were still worried about their stupid little lives. Cal was still worried about his stupid little marriage, and he wasn't even getting off the ship.
And he is jealous. He's rich. He gets what he wants, no matter the cost, and clearly he's prioritizing that.
So it's excruciating for the audience because we know that 1,000 people are about to die on this boat, and no one in the movie is taking it seriously yet, save for, I think, maybe one character.
Everyone's just annoyed by the vibrations.
So I'd like to point out that the pencil drawing was like 3 minutes.
It's too long.
It's too long.
It's not too long.
It was the most erotic moment in her life, girl.
That she
Yeah, allow the movie 3 minutes to portray the most erotic moment in the main character's life. I wish more movies
To
would
this
do that.
point, she said. She specified to that point.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
Like,
She was 17.
Then
How
she
many
banged
more
the-
erotic moments
Well,
does she have?
one more when she banged in a car.
Everything is so deliberate in this movie. I defy you to find a 3-hour movie that is tighter than this movie. You can go see a Marvel movie that's almost 3 hours where it's just them jerking themselves off about movies they haven't made yet.
Oh, yeah.
don't even get me started on Michael Bay.
Right.
Oh, I love this part because the guy in the crow's nest is like, oh, I can smell ice. I'm the ice smeller. And then
And-
he fails to smell the ice.
And it's crazy because you see the scene where they finally hit the iceberg, and the way you think the Titanic hit the iceberg isn't the way it actually hit the iceberg. And then everyone knows the Titanic's going to hit the iceberg when they watch this movie, but everyone is rooting for it to miss the iceberg somehow. And then it almost makes it, and then it just scrapes the hull just enough to breach those bulkheads. It's over.
Well, the problem was the guys looking for icebergs were looking at Jack and Rose making out. At the
That's
exact
right.
moment.
They were distracted by Jack and Rose. So essentially, Jack and Rose were at fault.
I would like to point out that initially, when they hit the iceberg, it is more poor people suffering and rich people being oblivious to the suffering of the poor people.
Yeah.
Their convenience, and not only that, that's a consistent theme through this movie. Cal makes it out alive, and he's the biggest dick at the end of this movie. There's nobody who's a bigger dick than Cal.
Okay,
and
but
saves his
Cal
life.
doesn't last until the end of the movie. Keep that in mind. After all of this, after he grabs a child and manipulates the crew into letting him onto a lifeboat with this random kid he picked up, he kills himself in 1929 during the stock market crash, and it was all for nothing.
First death was around 1 minute 42 seconds.
It was in the
or
boiler,
1 hour
or
42 minutes? Sorry.
It was in the cargo hold,
Yeah.
I think, when the
when they hit the iceberg, the people in the probably the people
investigating
Cottage area.
the crime that just took place in the car.
I mean, it was.
They're the first to go.
It was a sex in the car.
Yeah,
It was a sex in the car.
it was a cockblock squad. It was
Because the cock block
two
squad.
members of the cock block squad
They missed
died.
it.
Yeah.
They missed it.
By this much.
The whole like unsinkable ship thing was overblown from an article. Like nobody that designed the ship or worked on the ship, the owners of the ship, nobody actually presented it as an unsinkable ship.
Nope.
It
That was
just-
the media.
Exactly. One article in like an engineering magazine or something where they went over how the ship was built and the magnificence of the Titanic and the Olympic was just completely like blown sky high out of proportion.
We're kind of at the part in the movie where Jack gets framed for stealing that necklace. Billy Zane, Cal, he frames Jack. He puts a necklace in his coat.
Love Face slips the necklace into his coat as they're walking into the room.
Oh, but
Yeah.
Cal told him to do it. But
Yeah.
it was Cal's idea.
Under Cal's command.
And so Rose's faith is shaken in Jack, and she seems to have some legitimate doubt if maybe this was all about him trying to steal my shit.
After 2 days of dating, it must be tough for her.
2 days of magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, Rose should never go on Tinder. She'll just get played left and right.
She'll be
for
very
sure.
sad.
So the ship is sinking, and boy howdy,
The rich
does
people don't
it,
believe it. They're
Jack
just
and
like,
Rose have a front row seat for the whole thing, from
mean-
the iceberg to the fucking very end.
Everybody in the movie has a front row seat to the
No,
sinking
they're
of the
there when the
Titanic.
iceberg
Yeah,
scatters across
yeah,
the
yeah.
thing, and they're there as the stern dips into the water.
Oh my! This ship sinks. Like everybody gets just drowned.
No, I must be misremembering.
Ooh, this is not going to be good.
yeah, right here, this is like where everybody's starting to realize how bad the situation is. You know, was it like 2 hours into the movie? Everybody's like, well, this boat's going down, and there are going to be a lot of dead people because we don't have boats. She just runs to find Jack. She's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to get Jack. We're going to
Yeah.
get off this boat together.
Jack, who is now being held in handcuffs in the bowels of the ship by Loveface, and just a thrilling sequence. Rose is running through there. She has to save him from the handcuffs. She has to get a fire axe. She has to cut his handcuffs off. And then, like so much of the rest of the scenes in the end of this movie, they actually built that set on a hydraulic system where the whole set got submerged into cold water. Well, it wasn't cold. They shot it in like Mexico, or it was on stage, I think,
Yeah,
but
right.
whatever. You know, but it was,
That water was obviously very warm.
water
Yeah.
is, if you spend that much time in water, it doesn't matter how warm it is, you're gonna get cold eventually, unless it's 90 degrees. And they would just sink the set, and then they would do another take. They'd reset it, bring the ship back, bring the stage back up, dry everything out, reset all the props, and then hey, you gotta do it again. Just amazing.
Yeah, Kate thought she was going to die. She thought
Yeah.
she was going to drown on that boat because the way Cameron films his stuff, there's no compromise. He's like, he just go, 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 go. And actually, I thought that scene was a little bit long because she goes, sees Jack, leaves, runs down a hallway, meets a guy who doesn't help her, stands and
Oh, but
leans
that
against
guy
the wall.
is disoriented and panicked, and he tries to help her, and he tries to take her upstairs, and it doesn't sound like he speaks English very well, and she punches him in the
It's
face.
a great sequence. I mean, that's something that I love how long they draw that out.
With the way that this all ends up, like with the water level at where it's at once they get him free, their noses are pretty much in the water. Like there's no moment to spare, but they're having conversations, they're stressed out and leaning against the wall, all kinds of distractions.
So when Rose is on her way to save Jack, who's tied up, she finds Alias's dad randomly in the hallway. And it's like, hey, where do I go to the place where they keep people who are in handcuffs? And he gives her very specific directions, which don't really mean anything to us. But I guarantee those are the directions on the master prints of the Titanic.
And she remembers it flawlessly. It's one of the
Yeah.
few notes I have is that Rose is excellent with directions,
Yeah.
which is great for Jack or bad for Jack.
Some people are.
Bad for this elevator guy.
Your adrenaline's pumping. You're going to save some dude. You just totally remember every step of the way. No, that was one of the things why many of the people in the third class were stuck in the ship, was because it was basically a maze anywhere that they would have been housed, and they just weren't able even to make it up to the upper decks.
I remember back in 97, my classmates would comfort me because, I mean, everybody knew I loved the Titanic and everybody knew that I wasn't allowed to see the movie. It was a well-known thing in my class. That's the point to which this got. But people would comfort me by saying, oh, don't worry, it's just a love story. Like, you're not missing out on much.
That's a terrible comfort because this movie's great.
That's how
and
the
you missed
8-year-olds
out.
thought.
So I'm not sure. Have you said whether or not you like the movie or not?
No, I do. I think the set is really awesome. I think it's incredible. I think the story and it sucks that all the best characters die. That's the people that live are not the characters that I
Just
was
so you
rooting
know,
for.
Bill Paxton didn't die, and you're wrong. The best characters didn't die.
No, you're right. Actually, the only tension in this movie is you're like, who's going to live? Who's going to die? That's the spoiler, right? The spoiler isn't... The joke is, spoiler alert, the boat sinks. But the actual tension is, about half the people live. Who are those half? And which characters were you going to introduce?
Who are you going to fall in love with along the way and lose?
We are going to take a quick break, and you can expect to hear our final thoughts on... this was...
I think this one's Titanic. It's not our final thoughts yet.
Titanic?
Yeah,
we'll go to final thoughts after this. I mean, not right after the break, but...
We have one more chunk and then another break, then final thoughts.
Oh, we're going to do 2 breaks now.
We did 3 breaks last
Somebody
time.
wants too many breaks.
Do you
So
want to
we'll
do
be
3
back
breaks, or you
after a
want 2
break
breaks?
and then maybe another
3
break.
breaks? Yeah.
We're just going to break.
4 breaks?
So right now is a
8
break.
breaks.
My heart was pounding the whole time. It was the most erotic moment of my life. Up until then, at least.
So what happened next?
You mean, did we do it?
Welcome back to What a Disaster. We're here to talk more about the Titanic. So far, right now, we are all about to drown to death.
Or at least all of our friends.
And we are going to watch people die. So we're at that point in the movie. People are dying. Jack is just chained up to a pipe and needs to get the hell out.
And I like this beer we just got. Sea Rose.
Sea Rose. Is it just called Sea Rose?
It is just called Sea Rose.
Ballast
it's a tart
Point.
cherry wheat ale.
It's by Ballast Point. It's delightful.
It's really good. And when I picked it up, I bought it because it said Sea. And I'd forgotten her name was Rose. So that was an accident.
We
but
just
it's a
call her
great
Kate
accident.
And she's
Winslet.
also a tart cherry. So
Nice.
what did you think of the beer?
That was a good
the
one.
Sea Rose.
Oh, it's good. It's it's that cherry flavor comes through.
It's only 4%. It's not a strong beer.
I've never heard anyone say it's a beer in so many words before. Thank you,
Yep,
Chris.
I
there's
mean,
cherries in there.
Really, the label. I'm not sure I would even call it tart, but cherry wheat ale. That's all you need to know about.
Maybe
this beer.
maybe that cherry is a prostitute.
Doesn't taste like that.
I've never eaten a prostitute. I don't know.
Does it taste like it's been sleeping around for money for years?
No.
Speaking of which, let's talk about our next beer selection. Shorts Hot Loins.
My loins are so hot because of this beer. It's very spicy.
What's the description on that hot loins?
Specialty aphrodisiac ale. Brewed with goji berries, honey, dark sweet cherries. That's 2 cherries.
You can
I like
really
my
taste
cherries.
the cherries and the
Oh, what's this final
goji
line?
berries.
And in the mood.
She doesn't know the words. She can't read yet. We're working on it. She's doing very well. She pronounced goji.
Awesome, actually.
Yeah.
I'm
This
terrific
font
work.
is too much for me. Just make it
The
normal.
beer has really got her all riled up. It is gross in here right now.
It's so gross.
Let me see the bottle. Just give me the
It
bottle.
is hard to
that
read.
bottom line.
It's not hard to read. I got supervision.
Good luck.
Parental
and in the
supervision.
mood.
In the
And
mood.
in the mood, hair aromatic. Dude, I can't read that either. What
Wow.
the fuck? Is that English? Something organics?
Wait, I got this.
Wow, hang on.
I got this.
No. We're going to do this. McMood
And in the mood tea from Light of Day Organics.
tea. Wow. That's what that says.
Look at the Valentines on the
Oh
bottom of
my
the
god, this box
sixer.
is amazing too.
Look, if you need to get your girl something for Valentine's Day, 6-pack of Shorts Brewing Company, hot loins, yours and mine, specialty aphrodisiac ale. You got to do it. You can't go wrong. Take
Can't
my
pass
word
it
for
up.
I can't vouch for the goji berries, but I can vouch for the aphrodisiac effect.
Yeah.
He really can.
And
I can.
those tart cherries.
We're
You know what
back.
else is an aphrodisiac? Titanic.
Titanic. Oh yeah. They closed the gates in the movie.
Yes.
So
You break out eventually.
in inspection of the ship in more recent years, they found that most of the gates for the third class passengers were actually wide open, and most of the people that were trapped in the like below deck were stuck because it was just a giant maze that
The
was
class-
filling with water. So combine panic, the possibility of drowning, the thing you're going to be drowning in slowly rising up your body, all into this that would be terrifying. And they were just stuck and lost. It would have been
that's
horrendous.
True. You know what horrified me was the thought of the last people to be in the water, the last ones to freeze to death, thinking, man, the people who froze to death an hour ago had it easy. Because now I have to go through this now. I kind of wish I had gone through this an hour ago.
What if I just drown instead of freezing to death?
You see their bodies and you know
That's your
it's
turn.
inevitable.
It's inevitable. And that they got it easy because they're through it and you have to go through it.
I would
now.
hope that by the time the people around you had frozen, you would be delirious to the point where you wouldn't really be cognizant of that.
Hopefully,
hypothermia.
right?
Neither, but everybody's different. So there's bound to be
Hypothermia
somebody that's
isn't
just
the worst way to die.
No, you're right. You're right. It's not.
Did you guys notice that the third class kids were all 10,000 times cuter than the first class kids that actually made it into the
This
lifeboats?
movie's very anti-rich. I think we've established that by the end of the movie.
Kind of ironic for the most expensive movie ever made.
Yeah.
No
Seriously.
shit.
Was this more expensive than Waterworld?
Yes. I also think a lot about the captain, going to the wheel and just, the water coming up around the glass and then
That's
breaking
mine.
and killing him.
Yep, the captain and Mr. Andrews were really hard.
He was getting
It's
too
all
old for this
inevitable.
shit. Also, a lot of the crew were poisoned during the making of this film with PCP.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I sent that link over to Chris today. He was as surprised as I was to see that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's super crazy.
They were shooting in Canada, and they're wrapping, and they're having a celebratory meal, and somebody fucking poisoned the clam chowder with
Clam
PCP.
chowder.
And so everybody that ate the clam chowder had to go to the hospital and get their carbon crap pumped into their stomach and all that nonsense because, they were on drugs.
Everybody who ate the clam chowder. Everybody who ate the clam chowder. Everybody who ate the clam chowder had a fucking blast, is what you mean. Because somebody just gave them some free drugs.
Surprise drugs seem like the worst drugs.
And James Cameron knew he had been poisoned and forced himself to throw up before he got too fucked up. It's coincidentally, food poisoning is kind of responsible for the start of James Cameron's career because he was working as a fill-in director for his first feature, Piranha 2: The Spawning, and they were filming in Italy or something, and he got food poisoned somehow, and he had a fever and a flu or whatever, and he was in bed for a couple days, and he had these fever nightmares where he was being chased by some sort of thing with glowing red eyes, and that inspired The Terminator, which was his first real feature film.
Actually, I didn't know that.
I have to say, especially looking again at the scene where things are sinking and the water's rushing in, the props in this movie are incredible. They're so cool. They have all these little diagrams of the instruments and little gauges and panels with lights and dials.
Gauges and tubes and
Violins.
meters or whatever. I agree. It
They
is
would
a very
probably
well
just
done
draw
set.
that stuff today,
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah,
I
they
would-
did a very good job.
I would love to have a Titanic-themed bar where half of it was
Underwater.
Half of it was sort of underwater-ish, and then the other half was prestige and all the steampunk sort of stuff.
Put some windows that aren't windows. It's just a water tank back there,
Yeah.
so it looks like you're submerged.
What would you do? And your fate's basically sealed, but
You know it's coming. You're watching everyone around you die and suffer, and you've got to just
And you
either
just think,
fight it
what?
or accept it. What do you do? You're in panic mode, I'm sure, at that point.
The most frustrating part in this movie was that Cal lived. He steals a kid. He has a chance to get on the boat. He bribes his way on the boat, which is stupid because if you're the crew, you're not getting off. So he bribes his way to get on the boat, leaves the boat to go stop Jack and Rose from hanging out. Literally just goes, I'm going to go find them and stop them from hanging out. At this point, the boat's half submerged. You know this is going down. Everybody knows this is going down. He goes to find them, and he still manages to get on a lifeboat by stealing a kid and lying that the kid was his.
And then-
Cal lives.
And then he's looking for Rose among the survivors once they get on the Carpathia, and there's no sign of this kid at all. This kid never shows up again. Whatever happened to her? What did he do to her?
He had
I'm not suggesting that he killed her, but he abandoned her.
No,
Clearly.
he definitely
No,
killed
there's
her
a scene
and
where he just
wore her
hands her
skin.
off and starts fighting people off with an oar. He didn't
Yeah.
care about the
Yeah,
little
he-
girl once
he
he got on
left
the
her
boat.
alone, right.
He's a dick. He's a dick. At the end of this movie, he really
he
does
shows
no-
his true
nothing.
colors.
Yeah,
He becomes
absolutely.
unsympathetic at the end.
But there's one or two really important
panic
scenes
really
left in this movie,
turned
other
him
than
selfish.
people drowning. And one of those was where Rose gets on a lifeboat because
So hang on real quick before we get to Rose. You dismissed the part where everybody dies, but imagine like every other disaster movie we've either seen for the podcast or we've watched for the podcast, there is no point where there's this level of humanity that we watch suffer for as long as we do in Titanic. Yeah. Everything is just, it's all big sets, it's buildings toppling, but you don't think, they never show you.
Like,
we don't establish that those are buildings full of people that are falling. We don't establish that there's the earth splitting and there are people in those cars that are falling in. But with Titanic, the disaster,
one building, right?
It's exactly, and we deal with the people as they drown, as they're getting stuck in this thing, and they show every horrific detail. It is awful.
They have the characters make eye contact with people that are just about to die. Like at the very end on the stern, there's a blonde girl with curly hair who's with her boyfriend or something right next to Jack and Rose. And they have a small interaction. They kind of exchange this. Rose kind of gives her this comforting looking smile. And then a few minutes later, we watch her fall to her death. Mm-hmm. Like, there hasn't been anything like that in anything we watched.
But Rose does get on the lifeboat. She gets talked to get on the lifeboat. Jack and Cal talk her into it, right? And she gets about the slowest lifeboat. It's a really long scene. And it keeps lowering, but it's not really lowering that far.
No, that was realistic. It took fucking forever to launch these lifeboats. Thus, the time it took to launch lifeboats ended up being more of a limiting factor on who survived in the number of lifeboats. But yeah, that's realistic.
But she jumps off the lifeboat onto the second deck.
Right.
Leaves a spot vacant on a lifeboat that could have been used by another survivor because
maybe someone climbed in.
That's frustrating to me. And then Jack has to go down and rescue her again. Therefore, spending the rest of the movie getting her to safety. And when she was already to safety, she was already safe.
Yeah, but she didn't want to go live that life.
You didn't leave the boat after it lands. You can still walk away. Nobody's holding
She just met
was
the
in love with
person
Jack
exactly.
She thought
she was. It was infatuation or lust or whatever it was. That Jack was her life in that moment, and she needed him for her to even stay on that ship.
Well, she killed him.
Yeah, and I love that scene. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when they reunite right after she does that. And she's like, oh, I love you. And he's like, you're so stupid, Rose. You're so stupid. And they're both like sobbing.
So now we're at the point, I think kind of at the point of this movie. A lot of the people we care about die. People have seen this movie 1,000 times. I know. Like, all the men die pretty much, except for some of the rich men. They make you look at every dead body that they can at the end. You don't never get an escape from the destruction that this shipwreck costs. You never get away from it. You get to see every human cost.
In Titanic, you have 1,000 frozen corpses bobbing in the water with glassy eyes. It's just
the density of death.
The most
everywhere you go in this would be horrible. Like, especially even compared to 9/11. If you were in 9/11 at Ground Zero, you'd be looking at rubble.
Rubble.
This is just corpse.
Maybe some tissue. But
yeah, I mean, they beat you up with it in this, and it's hard if you really try to appreciate the weight of what he's doing with this.
Well, the tone at the beginning is so light, right? When you get on the boat, it's such a light, happy tone. It's that's the contrast. It gets dark at the end.
It gradually really darkens as you go, because you go from it's a happy movie to they're in love to they've got this tumultuous relationship and he doesn't want her to be happy unless he's with her, and it does gradually get darker as you go until the end where it's just
he's hitting her and the boat's sinking. It's
horrendous.
Something I thought a lot about during the course of this ending scene, especially as the stern of the ship after it broke in half was going down, was when I was around the time that this came out in 97, there was a place we used to go to called Formula K, and Formula K had an inflatable Titanic slide. So kids would crawl up into the center of the slide and slide down the deck.
Yeah.
As if they were themselves in the shipwreck. And it was just like, this is a massive, massive tragedy and turned into a plaything and a novelty.
Well, even the movie Titanic has turned into more of a novelty, I think, than it deserves to be. But now we're at the part I have to comment on this because we're at the famous part where Rose is, Jack's freezing to death. She's on the door floating. And, it's become a popular meme lately. Why didn't Jack just get on the door? There was plenty of room for both of them. Oh, Rose, she's such a horrible person. She let Jack freeze. Listen, it's a good meme, but if you watch the movie He tries to climb on with her, and they're too heavy for the buoyancy of the wood, so someone has to get off, and so Jack martyrs himself. It's not a question of space. If you have an issue with that, or for that matter, if you have an issue with how Rose says, draw me like you're one of your French girls, or how Jack says, I'm the king of the world, just watch the movie because it's all fucking fine in context.
Or tweet him.
Yeah, tweet me and we'll have I've been arguing on Twitter the last couple of days like a degenerate. I will argue with you about Titanic, believe me. Then we can talk about gun control.
Oh, she looks cold.
And all the breath is CGI.
All the cold breath is CGI?
Yeah.
They don't just put cold people in the water?
Right. Yeah. It's actually like, 80-degree. I mean, they were all fucking cold. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it would be miserable.
Especially when you're in there for hours.
With James Cameron on his crane screaming.
He's just
down.
like, hey, check it out, guys. I'm warm and dry.
James Cameron's
Kate
down there in
Winslet,
his
you're fat.
wetsuit.
Oh, is that what he was doing?
James Cameron shot a lot of this stuff, handheld by himself, wearing his wetsuit and stuff. He loves
insane.
that stuff.
Well, he likes the water. It's unfair.
Yeah.
This part, I have some sympathy for old lady Rose because she just relived the most horrendous thing that has ever happened to her in her life and recounted the tale to the people that are down there trying to be greedy ass bitches getting that diamond. And man, that would be a struggle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were making light of it. They were like any American would at the time. We're like, look at this cool model. Look at what happens with the Titanic. She's like, I was fucking there.
Well, that's great. And that was just the shot because all the treasure hunters are pretty flippant with the subject material early on in the movie. And we haven't even seen the present day in like at least an hour and a half. Like I think the last time we see modern day Rose is after the portrait.
Yeah.
And then everything else is.
She makes a sex joke and it goes right back.
And so we haven't even seen that. And so finally after this horror, we go back to them and all the treasure hunters, they're not laughing anymore. They're all in tears. Perfect touch.
Yeah, and they gave up kind of on the treasure hunting. She talks him out of it.
Yeah, actually she does.
They do.
Yeah.
He was like Bill Paxton was sitting on the boat at the end and was just like hanging out with his Skeletor wife.
Yeah, I never got the point.
Yeah.
That was Rose's granddaughter.
Yeah, but
that wasn't his wife.
There was a romantic interest there.
Which is actually, I saw, again, this more contemporary documentary with James Cameron. His regret is that he kind of had the same problem where when he was making the movie and getting fascinated in the nuts and bolts of the disaster, he kind of lost sight of the human element more than he planned to.
Yeah, well, I mean, he captured it.
Yeah, he certainly did. And it's grim.
Too bad the love scenes were boring.
The one love scene.
The hour of
the boob
romance.
scene and the sweaty car scene are both love
Oh
scenes.
my god!
Sweaty
We skipped
boob
over
scene?
the sweaty car scene because
Sweaty car scene.
But
I
that
love
was
it.
stupid.
Oh,
I
I
hate
love
it.
it.
Separate.
I hate the hand.
I love the hand on
the
the glass.
That has inspired so many future romantic encounters in film. You just
And
need
in
to
real
deal
life.
with it. And
It looks
yeah,
so sweaty
everybody's
and
like, "Oh, hang on, the
uncomfortable."
window's foggy," and they just slap their hand up there. You guys didn't see that, but I reached my hand up and,
And then
slapped
there's a
the
cop shining
invisible
his
window.
light through, like kill face, like love face.
Right.
Yeah.
Kill face.
He's changing. He is
Love kill. Is he love kill? Love killjoy? Love face death?
He has a nice handgun. He has a very nice handgun.
He's a Batman villain at this point.
Yeah.
Rose has a blanket. Nobody else gets a blanket, but she has had a blanket for a while now, even on the rescue boat.
And
It matches her hair and eyes perfectly.
And Cal's like, oh, that's not Rose. That's just a girl with the pearl.
So-
That's just some
That-
homeless lady.
So
probably.
Rose is kind of an asshole. At the end of this movie, she changes her name to Rose Dawson. Doesn't tell any of her family members that she survived. Nobody knows she survived. She doesn't check in on them later.
She's listed
Nothing.
among the dead.
Her
That's
mom
clearly
survives.
noted.
But she doesn't know
Right?
that Rose
No,
survived.
yeah, her mom survives, but Rose Bell, blah, blah, blah. Her name started with a B in the beginning of the movie. That person was registered among the dead, but Rose Dawson was registered among survivors.
There were definitely family members on that ship that were just allowed in because their mom was there first or whatever.
So yeah, I'm not, as much as I like the movie, I am not super big on the ending where basically Bill Paxton / James Cameron says, oh, you know what? I don't care about the diamond anymore. It was such a tragedy. And then you see old ass Rose, 100-year-old walking corpse, gets up in the middle of the night, her nightgown flowing in the breeze, and she cautiously approaches the rail of this research ship. And she turns out this whole time she's been holding this $1 million jewel, the heart of the ocean, and she just throws it into the lake.
No shoes, no socks.
No shoes, no socks.
To be fair, I mean, she's old, so Fuck it. Why
climbs
not?
up
Nobody's
on the
going to
rail.
stop an old lady from being
She's
an old
dying
lady.
that night. She can do what she wants.
She
Right.
climbs up on the rail a little bit like she did on the bow, which
Yeah.
is kind of a nice touch.
Yeah.
And you know
That
what?
was also the stern.
Let's just
actually.
end the movie here. I don't need this like aha moment where she has the jewel the whole time. Who cares?
Yeah, this really, like, the whole thing didn't need to be there. And I feel like it was kind of James Cameron, as you said earlier, maybe it was a parallel to him realizing that he had strayed so far from the humanity of the movie that's what that Bill Paxton short monologue was all about. Was just him realizing that he had gotten away. He was so obsessed with making this Titanic movie that he hadn't considered the lives that he was affecting. And he's just like, you know what? Let's throw that in there for artistic flourish.
Or maybe it was just like, let's throw that in there and it can be a licensed product from K Jewelers and the studio can
And
make some
Britney
extra
Spears'
money.
astronaut
What?
boyfriend can rescue it in the video for "Oops, I Did It Again."
Was that
And-
K-Fed?
No, it
Oh.
wasn't. No, it predated K-Fed. But she said, "But I thought the old lady threw it in the ocean in the end." And he said, "Well, baby, I went down and got it for you." Look at Rose carrying around a picture of her sexy self.
Yeah, so we pan by all the pictures that she brought with her on the ship.
Of herself.
Just so we can establish in a very lazy way that she's actually had all the great adventures of her life that she had thought she would have with Jack. And then, does Rose die or not? I don't know. She's in her
Yes, she
bed.
dies in the end.
She's just kind of in her bed sleeping. It's not clear if she dies or if this
No,
is
it's
just in
clear.
her dreams.
They
When is
tell
it
you.
clear? They say she
They don't
dies?
say she
Yeah,
dies.
they
They
say
don't
she
say
dies.
she dies.
They don't say she died. She could be sleeping.
She could be sleeping because the
be a
Celine
dream.
Dion song says, "Every night in my dreams, I see you, I feel you."
I feel you.
But then as she's sleeping,
No.
we're back on the Titanic.
Yeah.
The CGI wreckage of the Titanic magically morphs, a great effect shot, into the
Especially for 97.
into the glorious Titanic.
Fuck this scene. I hate this scene.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it either.
It's pretty, but narrative-wise, I don't like it.
I don't like it.
It
It's
didn't
too
need to
happy
be
of
here.
an ending.
So pretty much, I think we can more or less all agree that the modern day stuff didn't necessarily need to be here at all.
Oh, I disagree.
You think so?
Yeah.
What do you think needed to be here from the modern day stuff? I'm not saying that it was worthless to the movie. I'm saying the movie could have lived without it, and it would not have had as dramatic.
It pled to her
very dramatic effect.
characters. It pled to her character's respect of anonymity and of not making a name for herself, just living her life the way that she wanted.
Is she dead and in heaven right now?
That's what-
Are
okay,
these
so-
2 days.
Well, I think
This
it
is-
adds to the story of the Titanic.
This is what the internet says. It says Cameron really left that up to the audience to provide their own interpretations. Some people think that the final scene is only a dream. Others are of the opinion that Rose died and they're reuniting in the afterlife.
I don't know. I mean, it's a moving shot. I can't think of a way to end this movie any better.
I just hate that everything's better when we're all dead kind of like ending. You know what I
I
mean?
would have been fine with Rose Dawson, credits.
Also, I was going to say
Maybe.
this a little earlier. She shows up in Ellis Island, broke, has $1 million necklace, and carries it around with her for another 80 years. She would have sold that for food,
Yeah.
for shelter.
Yeah.
There was,
Or it meant something to her and she chose not to because she could work her way up from the bottom
she
because
hated
she
that
was
necklace.
Yeah,
she
she
always
hated
hated
it.
that necklace.
No, she loved that necklace because it was a fuck you, and she kept it because it was a fuck you.
She should have sold it for food and to carry on her adventures. That would have been a better tribute to Jack than
Every adventure, she's holding it over her head like the severed head of Cal.
the separate head of cow.
But the modern day stuff I think is important because the modern day context of the Titanic wreck I think is important to the Titanic story, and also the CGI stuff at the beginning, their computer model sets you up so that we don't have to keep going back to Rose to narrate through the last 2 hours of the movie because we know how the Titanic flooded and sank and broke apart because it's been established in the first 10 minutes of the movie. So you recognize these things as they're happening and you're like, oh wow. That's
Well, I didn't
fascinating.
look at how many minutes were spent in the future versus how many were spent in the past. I don't know. I don't feel like they needed to be. I'm not saying they added nothing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they weren't necessary to convey the narrative of what experiences Rose and Dawson had on the ship.
I don't disagree with that. I understand why it's there. I have a couple theories for why it's there. One, I think James Cameron just wanted to play with the Titanic and found an excuse to use the footage.
True.
Secondly,
Very true.
I think at the time, especially in 1997, he realized that audiences weren't going to accept just a historical movie, a movie that's just taken place in the past. He thought that having more of a modern
So the period
set
piece wasn't going to work, so
Yeah.
just add Bill Paxton and call it good?
Yeah, exactly. No, honestly, yeah. Make it a little interesting in the front. Grab some of those people who don't have the attention span for a historical piece of fiction, which is basically, it is historical
Well, it's
fiction.
like, what about Saving Private Ryan?
Yeah.
Which is also bookended by something that happens in modern day. Would that have been effective
But that
without
was-
the modern day stuff?
That was just, I won't say just, but it was the beginning and the end. It wasn't something they were trying to push on as part of the narrative. It was an old man recounting his experiences, and it was very short relative to what we had, the subplot of I'm trying to find this treasure and all that stuff. It just,
Yeah.
they didn't try and shoehorn anything else in. And I'm sorry, but James Cameron is no Spielberg.
What
I
about,
think he's better.
no way.
I just wanted to get Chris's hackles up.
And we're going to go to a break because we're going to come back and talk about how we felt about this movie.
All right, sounds good to me. Let's break it up.
Gentlemen, it has been a privilege playing with you tonight.
And we're back. Welcome back to the What a Disaster podcast. We are about to finish up with the Titanic. That's the movie about the boat that sinks, and everybody's like, whoa, drowning or whatever. It's cold. So we're back, and we are going to go through our final thoughts on the film and give it our ratings. So, Richard, what did you think of the movie?
I didn't care for this movie a lot. I expressed that early on.
Hang on, I got to mute his mic. He's an idiot. Go ahead. Go ahead. It's my fault. Go ahead.
My mic?
Yeah, that's because you're an idiot.
I don't like it. It's paced a little too slow for me. I wasn't a big fan.
It is a 3-hour-long movie.
I wasn't a big fan of the love scenes. I wasn't convinced that Jack and Rose really cared for each other at all. I've seen better love stories. But I will say James Cameron's a very accomplished director. He did a very good job at recreating the Titanic, recreating the sets, and sinking the motherfucking ship and murdering all those people. I just wanted an hour less movie. That's why I don't like this film. But I do really like the detail that went into this. And I enjoyed more of the research after I watched the movie than the time I spent watching the movie.
All right.
I give it a 6.5 out of 10 on a Richter scale.
All right.
How
And
does it feel to be objectively wrong based on world box office returns?
now, Liz, what do you think about the movie?
Well, I have a feeling a lot of what we're going to see in the future with this podcast is going to be a lot worse. But I thought visually this movie was stunning. The protagonists were lacking in certain aspects, but a lot of the characters were still really, really cool, and I liked them. And I was sad to watch them die, and I cried a lot. So it impacted me. I'd give it a 7 out of 10 on the Lister scale.
7.0 on the Lister scale. Chris, what did you think?
I mean, Titanic's one of the greatest movies of all time in my book. Yes, you can say the romance isn't the best romance of all time, or this factor weren't the best of all time, but this movie is competent at just about everything it attempts. It's a technical marvel. It's a historical recreation marvel. It's just a very compelling emotional experience. I would have to give it probably an 8.5 or a 9 on my scale, and
8.5 or 9.
9.1. But one thing I will say is, you know what? If you haven't seen this movie before, well, if you have seen this movie before, maybe watch it again. If you think you know how you feel about this movie, check it out again. If you've never seen it before, you really owe it to yourself to see it, but immerse yourself. This is a movie for a dark room. Put the phone away, because you really got to get immersed in the world of this movie, and you have to put yourself on the ship for 3 hours to really get the emotional impact at the end. But it's great. It's great.
Yeah, we don't really get to do that when we watch this movie, right? Like, 'cause I have to take notes and stuff. The immersion is kind of lost.
And that ending, that it feels like the end of the world feeling, it's hard to get that if you're also on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, as Chris said, you definitely should put some effort out there. If you haven't seen it, or definitely go see it. And if you've seen it before, like me, I watched it as a teenager and I was not as enthralled with it, but I watched it again, as an adult, obviously, and I was much more appreciative of the film overall. Maybe it's because I appreciate cinema more in general, but just seeing all of the foreshadowing and the callbacks and being immersed and put in the perspective of somebody as though I was on the ship watching all of this stuff unfold from the start of their relationship to finally dying in the ocean, unfortunately. I was there. It was incredible, and this absolutely, I can see why Chris feels that this is one of the greatest movies of all time, and I am 100% on board with that. I'm with him. I would give this easily a 9.0 on the Gregter scale.
The Gregter scale is always a little heavy.
Your mom's a little heavy.
Oh.
Actually, a lot heavy. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's my
she's
fault.
got a problem. It's a weight problem.
It's not a weight problem. It's a weight like everything.
I got a weight solution for you.
What's that weight solution, Richard?
We're waiting. I would like to thank Christopher Slatt for showing up and doing our podcast with us today. He is one of the founding members of Every Horror Movie on Netflix, where they review every horror movie on Netflix. They started alphabetically. They occasionally go a little off the alphabet, right?
Well, deliberately. There's rules. We do like 4 episodes in alphabetical order, and then we'll do one that's out of alphabetical order.
Yeah, they got rules. There's a system.
Yeah, but
That's
yeah,
the
we're
important
watching
thing.
a lot of stuff. We're compelled to watch the movies we watch. We don't get to just pick them willy-nilly like y'all.
Hey, we're not picking willy-nilly. We're accepting guest suggestions.
There's
when
no nilly.
people show up, there's no nilly. We got Willy. 2 willies? 1 nilly? Anyway, so every horror movie on Netflix, the website is, of course, everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com, or AmonCast, which is EHMON cast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can tweet at them, troll them. They'll troll you right back. It's really a great podcast. I definitely recommend listening
We're
to it.
available, hopefully, on all your favorite podcast platforms, iTunes Store, all that stuff. So check us out, and you might hear one of your favorite personalities from What a Disaster guest starring on our show.
You might make sure you hit like on those feeds. Leave some comments.
Mash that like button.
Bash that like button.
Like, share, subscribe.
All right, so for Richard Sawasinski, Liz Bedore, Christopher Slatt, and myself, Gregory Allen, thanks for making it all the way through this Titanic podcast and not drowning.
Bye.
Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Good job, everybody.
Adios, muchachos.
Did I talk over her?
That's fine.
Do it again. It doesn't matter. We can just add.
Adios.
All right, do it now while nobody's talking. Okay, stop it.
Perfect.
All right, bye. Okay, good. So I would like to thank Chris for being here. My fucking
Thanks,
shit
Chris.
ass fucking shit is fucking
Thanks.
starting up now. God damn it, because it went
Chris
to
and your
goddamn
shit
sleep.
ass shit coming out here to hang out with us and your sweet ass podcast. I'm glad you came to do ours, and we can send people to yours, which is every
That's
horror
what
movie
I'm
on
trying
Netflix.
to get to, Richard. Stop it.
Every horror
Do I gotta
movie
do
on
my
Netflix.
own plug? Is
No, I'm just trying to get into my thing because I want to make sure that I don't fucking.
If
fuck
you're
it
touring
all up.
anywhere, I recommend staying the city first
Oh, it's over here.
before where you're going, so people know.
I wasn't even on the computer that wasn't starting up. It was on this one. I would like to thank Christopher Slatt for showing up today. I've got to do that again because I clipped. I would like to thank. Boop.